Welcome to the Champs App podcast, where we help players and parents demystify the world of minor hockey development and recruiting for both girls and boys. On today's episode, I talk with Lee-J Mirasolo, who is the associate coach with the Harvard women's hockey program. We discuss her starting to play hockey later than most kids, having an incredible work ethic, injustice in girls hockey, the Ivy League student athlete hockey experience, and of course, the Harvard women's hockey program. I really enjoyed my conversation with Lee-J, and I hope you do too. Before we get to our guest, if you enjoyed this episode and want us to keep making more of them, please share it with teammates and friends. You can also subscribe, like, follow, and even better, it would be great if you would leave us a review. Now, let's drop the puck and get to the show.
I'm very excited to have on the Champs App podcast Lee-J Mirasolo, who is the associate head coach with the Harvard women's hockey program. Originally from Wakefield, Massachusetts, Lee-J played her college hockey at Boston College and was the captain of the team in her senior year. After BC, Lee-J coached at Phillips Academy and UMass Boston before heading to the Ivy League, where she was an assistant coach at Princeton for 4 years. And then in 2015, she switched Ivy League affiliations and joined the Harvard staff, where she has been for the last 7 years. Welcome to the podcast, Lee-J.
Thanks for having me, Ray. I'm excited to be here.
I'm delighted to have you finally on the podcast. And I'm going to ask the question that everyone really wants to know about you is what's with the J in Lee-J? And I've heard of AJ, TJ, PJ, but not Lee-J before. Please explain the J.
The J just stands for my middle name. And before I was even born, my parents decided that they were going to call me Lee-J. I don't really know why. They just, I don't know, they were feeling creative maybe. And so that's where it comes from.
That's awesome.
And my middle name is Janine, spelled
cool.
Jean 9.
Awesome. Well, that explains it, and definitely unique. No one's gonna, mistake you for another Lee without the Lee-J. So I gotcha. So great. So now we'll go on to the first question that we ask every guest to start with is, please tell us a little bit about your hockey history, how you started playing hockey as a kid, and what made you such a great player that allowed you to play, college hockey at Boston College.
Well, I started when I was in the 6th grade, which was a little bit late. But when I was in the 5th grade, I went to my cousin's, one of her spring league games at the Pingree School. And I'll never forget standing there, watching her play, and then looking up at my uncle and saying, I think I want to try this. And so from then on, she would dress me in her equipment at every holiday, every family gathering, every family party, and parade me around the whole party. So that's how I started. I started the next year in the 6th grade and then never looked back.
So I got a question for you. So one of the videos that I saw that you've done previously on YouTube, you mentioned that you could skate like the wind. But if you only started playing in the 6th grade, how did you become such a great skater so quickly?
I don't know. I think it was, I have no idea. I think I just skated before when I was younger and didn't start playing hockey until I was older. But yeah, I think that's how it happened.
Okay, what other sports were you playing then? Because you obviously must have been a good athlete, to begin with, to start so late playing hockey.
Well, thanks. Very kind words and assumptions. But I actually originally was, I wanted to be the first girl to play for the Boston Red Sox. And so I played baseball growing up and then switched to softball. And then I also played soccer and field hockey. So definitely just loved playing outside a ton and would try any sport that was available to me.
Gotcha. And did you feel like playing all those other sports made you, highly athletic for hockey, which obviously needs a lot of the basic skills of agility and speed and strength and hand-eye coordination from those other sports that were easily applicable to hockey?
Yeah, no question. I think just being a good athlete makes you, and a more well-rounded athlete makes you a better whatever sport you're playing, an athlete in those sports. So I think playing softball made me a better hockey player, and playing hockey made me a better softball player. And that's true for, I think, all sports. So absolutely.
Gotcha. And so then, after you were 12, like, who did you play with? Were you playing with girls? Were you playing with boys? What was your youth hockey experience like?
I played for the Reading Rockets, the girls program growing up, and then switched to the North Shore Vipers. And both were with girls. I never played with boys. But I really had a great opportunity just right in my hometown and next door to my hometown to get going. And then I played for Wakefield High School after that.
Gotcha. So you played town hockey basically in Massachusetts, growing up with the girls. Okay, I gotcha. And were you like, I know you played forward now. Were you a natural goal scorer? Were you the best player on your team pretty quickly? Like, how did that all happen that you became so good so quickly?
I don't know if I became so good so quickly, but you are very kind with your assumptions. I think that I don't think that I was the best player. I think I was pushed every day by the players that I had an opportunity to play with. And so, but I definitely, I think I worked really hard at my craft and would be in my backyard. I made my own ladder out of rope, which probably wasn't even conducive to working well, but I just tried really hard is basically what it came down to. And I had access, I had access to different people who were coaching different things. And I was really lucky in that way. I don't think everybody has the access that I do
Gotcha.
and that others do.
Were you getting a lot of extra skill training outside of just playing for your team? Like, were you taking skating lessons? Were you taking, shooting? Did you have a shooting coach? Things like that, or was it all just self motivated and just hanging out with your friends that kind of pushed you to develop those skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was different then than it is now. There weren't. I mean, I don't know of any shooting coaches at the time, and I'm sure that there were. But no, I just tried to do every time I heard of an opportunity to get on the ice, whether it was just open ice or something else, I'd be at it. And every time if someone was playing street hockey, I'd be at that too. And so it was more informal training.
Gotcha. And at what point did you realize like a college career was a possibility? Like, when did the light bulb go on saying, okay, like maybe I can go play at one of these colleges that are in the Boston area?
Um, like the light bulb thing, I think I'm not sure I even thought, oh, this is a possibility. I was like, I'm not sure it's a possibility, so I need to work my tail off in order to make sure that it becomes a possibility. And so that's basically what I did and what I tried to do. And I wasn't like a crazy recruited athlete by any means. I just I think I ended up being really lucky and really fortunate, um, and I consider myself to be extremely lucky.
Okay, so let's talk about the recruiting process with BC. So previous guest, Katie King Crowley, was on the podcast. Was she involved in the recruiting process with you, or was it one of her assistants?
Yeah, so I was at Kasabusky Arena, which is in Saugus off of Route 1. Local people would definitely know the place. And so it was a Wakefield game. It was probably February of my senior year. And so at this point, I wasn't really heavily recruited. I was considering a post-grad year at that point. And then my coach walked in, gave her a post-game spiel, and then said, oh, and Lee-J, the BC coach is here and wants to talk to you. And so I was like, what? That's crazy. And so I actually was so excited that I walked out of the locker room with one skate on and one skate off. And so I like hobbled out and walked out, and it was Tom Much and Katie King at the time. And they were standing there and they said, we'd really like you to come for a visit and all of that stuff. And they also said you could have taken off your skates and come out here. But it was it was a dream come true for me. And so it was the two of them at the time who recruited me, and it just was truly a dream come true.
And did you look at any other schools, or that was it? It was just BC, and the decision was easy.
Well, my parents and I did kind of like a tour of driving and looking at different schools and whatnot. But I think when it came down to it, I was going to do a post-grad year so that I could go to a place like BC. And so because BC came up, I was like, oh my goodness, this is better than I expected. And so it was a great opportunity for me, and yeah, totally lucked out.
And I'm sure one look at the campus, it was pretty easy to do it because I took a drive through the campus a little earlier last summer, and I could see how people fall in love with it the instant they check out the campus, because it's just awesome.
Yes, definitely.
All right, so clearly you have a very strong memory of you getting introduced to the BC coaches by walking out of the locker room with one skate on. I'm curious, looking back on your youth hockey experience, what was your best youth hockey memory?
Oh man, that's a great question. I remember gaining, and I'm not sure that this is a great memory, but I think it's one that has shaped who I've become. And I remember gaining this sense of injustice, and I don't think that I had the vocab for it at the time, but gaining this sense of injustice between boys hockey and girls hockey when I was younger. And we in Wakefield, Mass, we didn't have a rink, and there's still no rink in Wakefield, Mass. So we would travel to East Boston or to Medford or just surrounding towns to go practice and kind of pieced it together that way. And the boys did the same thing. But I'll never forget showing up to a rink and the JV boys, they had double booked the JV boys and the varsity girls. And you can probably guess which team had to leave. And it was the varsity girls. And I remember being so rattled by that and so angry by that. And I think that really started to make me understand, wow, there are injustices. And I think I was so disappointed at the time because it was shocking to me. You know, it was like, what? This is crazy. And now I know that that's something that happens more than
Every
it
day.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. And so part of the reason why I coach is to help decrease those stories, and hopefully help young people not have those experiences. And that hopefully is good for everybody, for girls and for boys and for all genders.
Wow, that's an awesome story. And you know, I'm sure it wasn't the most positive experience at the time, but you're making it into a positive experience on dedicating yourself to you know, helping change how hockey is perceived and how girls get treated. So that's awesome. Okay, let's move over to your time at Boston College. So my first question is, so you were a forward, and you and I both know that you were not the most offensive forward at Boston College. But my question is, so you had only 10 points in your 4 years that you were there. So
Thanks
you
for
had
bringing that up, Ray. Thanks for
Okay,
bringing it up.
it gets worse. So I know you had 4 points in your first year. Did you think you were going to at least get more than 4 points in any of your other remaining 3 years?
I did. You know, I really, really thought like I'm going to work so hard this summer and I'm going to come back ready to go. And the truth of the matter is that I did work really hard. I worked hard every single summer. And I think there are a lot of things at play. I think, first of all, there are other people working just as hard, and they are, hopefully as they get better, hopefully I'm getting better, as I'm getting better, they're getting better. And so I think, yeah, I mean, of course I was dreaming bigger than 4 points, but I can look back at this in a different way than I felt about it then. But yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. And so what people also may not understand is that you were the captain of the team in your 4th year. So you were clearly a leader, other than you know, with your scoring prowess, your productivity. What was it that made you captain material, and what were you doing both on the ice, at practice, and off the ice that made you, you know, one of the captains for the 2007-2008 year at BC?
Well, first of all, I think what we've kind of talked about this whole time is that I work hard, and there are plenty of people that work hard, so it doesn't necessarily separate me. But I think I work hard, and I also really try hard, and I've gotten better at it since then. So I think that I try to listen to people and to meet people where they're at. And I think that's one of the biggest and most important qualities that we can have, is to actually just listen to the experience of people without judgment. And I think in doing that, it's not the reason I do it is not to be a leader. The reason I do it is because it's a good thing to do for people and to hopefully make people feel like they belong. And I think a byproduct of that was that I became the captain of the team, one of the captains.
Nice. So kind of looking back then at your college career overall, I understand that your favorite movie is Back to the Future. So if you could go take yourself back to your youth hockey self, and even college, what would you either bring yourself, like, you know, you can't bring a sports almanac so you can win all the future betting things like they did in the movie, but what would you either tell yourself or bring yourself back if you can go back to your youth hockey days right before you went to BC?
I would tell myself therapy is cool. And I know that's crazy. I know that might be crazy, But in reality, I actually think that if we all, and if we could destigmatize mental health, we would all be in a better place. And I know that I would have been a better hockey player had I, just because of the mental aspect, had I dealt with some of the things that I was thinking and feeling and all of that stuff. And that's another reason why I coach, is to make sure that our players and any player that I come into contact with, somehow, some way, I make sure that they know that they can feel all their feelings and that it's okay and not to judge them. And I think that part of it for me is incredibly important. And if I could tell myself that back then, I wouldn't change a thing, because I think it would change the trajectory of my life, and I don't want to do that. But if I could, that's what I would tell myself.
Okay, awesome. I am going to touch back on that subject when we get to the Harvard side of things.
Okay.
But now just tying off your playing career, looking back on all the coaches that you had, and it could be from outside hockey as well. Who was your best coach and why?
That is such a good question. That is such a good question. I've had so many good coaches and so many who have taught me so much. And I think that I don't know if we call her Kinger, I call her Kinger, but I think Kinger was the best coach that I've had. And the dynamic duo of Katie King and Courtney Kennedy was tremendous. And so I feel really lucky that I got to play for both of them and now I know them in a totally different way. To know them as people and to call them friends and mentors now is really, I'm so lucky.
Awesome. Okay, well, you had some pretty good mentors. Why did you decide to become a coach yourself? And maybe talk about your transition from BC and graduation and then becoming a coach. Did you do anything in between? Did you explore other options before you became a coach at Phillips Academy Andover, or did you just go right into coaching, and why?
So when I graduated in 2008, there was this recession, I guess, going on. And if I'm being totally honest, there weren't a ton of jobs. And so I did a bunch of informational interviews. I was a communications major, so I did a bunch of informational interviews for advertising firms and PR companies and marketing companies and things like that, which basically means I interviewed and got to ask all these questions of these people who didn't have a job to offer me. And so it was a great experience, and I was super lucky to be able to go and talk to all these people. But at the end of the day, I didn't come out with any sort of job. So I ended up taking this job doing skills, hockey skills. And I was like, this will be a temporary thing until I find a job and, use my degree and all this stuff. And the truth of the matter is that I was looking for something and thinking, what if there's something out there that I love as much as I love hockey? And then I realized at some point that, why am I looking for something when I have that something right here? And so coaching, I coached skills, and then I coached at Phillips Andover. And then I was like, I want to do this all the time. I don't want to just do it some of the time. I don't want to just do it, for a couple hours in the afternoon. I want to do this as my job and my career. It's something that brings together all of my passions. And so interviewed for the position at UMass Boston, and then went to Princeton from there, and then back to Harvard. And I realized that I don't need to find something else because I already have it.
Gotcha. Okay, well, you quickly jumped over Princeton and UMass Boston. Let's just talk about going to Princeton for 4 years with Jeff Campersall and Kara Morey. I mean, some pretty good people to be hanging out with. Jeff is the head coach at Penn State, and Kara obviously now the head coach at Princeton. What was your 4 years like there, and what was it like, moving from the Ivy League to the Ivy League?
So being with Jeff and Kara was amazing, and I had an unbelievable time with them. I learned so much. Jeff really gave me a shot at the Division I level, and he did it really early. So meaning I had only been in NCAA hockey coaching for a year at UMass Boston, and becoming the second assistant at Princeton at that time. That was a big jump, and it was a big job. And Jeff rolled the dice on me, and I hope he feels like he gambled right. But it was a tremendous opportunity. And I think that because of the way that Jeff leads, he delegated a lot and allowed me to do a lot of things. And so I was able to learn so much from working with him and working with Kara. It was truly a privilege to work with the two of them.
Gotcha. So now, excluding Jeff, who left the Ivy League to go to Penn State, one of the questions somebody asked me is, why do Ivy League coaches stay in the Ivy League? So Kara, went to Brown and ended up at Princeton. We had Mel Ruzzi on the program, and then you went from Princeton to Harvard. Why? Is it because you all know each other, or is it because the recruiting is actually slightly different because there's no scholarships? Is there a reason why like the Ivy Leagues tend to stay with the Ivy Leagues and the coaches tend to just switch schools?
That's a great question. I actually think for me, and I can't speak for everybody, but for me, it's less about the recruiting or things like that. Sure, going from somewhere familiar to somewhere familiar is an easier transition than something else. But for me, I really believe in what the Ivy League stands for and what it tries to do. And I think it's just it's an unbelievable combination of academics and athletics, where you can really excel at both. And education through athletics is something that I truly believe in, and that's an Ivy League motto. And so to me, coaching is about educating, and it's about learning. And I'm not just saying that this is cyclical. I'm not just saying, oh, we're the teachers and the players are the students. They're teaching us just as much. And so I think in the Ivy League, that is celebrated. And that's something that is really, really unique and special to me.
Gotcha. Okay, so now let's transition to Harvard. For folks who haven't heard of Harvard, it's located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it's a pretty well-known school for its academics, I believe, and the hockey's pretty good there too. Maybe talk just a little bit about the school and the facilities, in particular the Bright Landry Hockey Center. Technically, I believe the actual arena is not in Cambridge; it's just across the river. Is that correct? So maybe give me some more information just about the school and the facilities before we get to how you ended up at Harvard.
Yeah, I mean, the cool part about Harvard is the history, and you can walk around campus, you can go on a tour here, and you're gaining so much. Boston is a historical place, Cambridge is a historical place, and so being able to learn the history as you're walking around, it's pretty neat in that sense. And then the Bright Landry Hockey Center, we have everything you need in order to be a great hockey player and develop into the hockey player that you want to be, whatever that means. And so it is across the river, and that's a term that we use here as, when you're across the river, as you walk across, start getting focused on hockey, on practice, and leave everything else outside the rink, so that when you walk in, you can be focused here. And then when you walk back across the river, it's really important. We don't want you to think about hockey here when you're over there. We want you to focus on being a student and having a social life and all of those things. And so I think, if there's three parts to everybody's experience, academics, athletics, and social, we don't want you to have to choose one or two of those things. We want you to have all three.
Okay, so you actually led me right into one of my upcoming questions. So I'm going to jump right to it. So when I was growing up, one of my parents' friends, who were much older than even my parents, they had a daughter who was the goalie for the Harvard women's team in the 1980s. Her name was Tracy Kimmel, and that was the first time I ever heard of girls hockey. Was my parents talking about how the Kimmel's daughter played goalie at Harvard. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Lindsay Fry, because this is what still sits in my brain, which is, how the heck do players do well both at school and play hockey at Harvard? Because I always thought of Harvard as just the most challenging academic school to go to, and then geez, to go play Ivy League and ECAC hockey at the same time just kind of makes my brain explode. So help me understand how you help players do that, and maybe it has to do with some of the mental stuff that you were talking about earlier with like dealing with the stress of managing multiple priorities at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the players have it figured out. And I think when they get here, there is an adjustment. And it depends on what your situation was like in high school. But I think there's adjustment for most people in most places too. So, and that's no different here. So I think what ends up happening is that time management, whether you have it before you come here or you come here without it, you better get it quick. But I think there's all sorts of safety nets that are in place. And the truth is that the Harvard name brings with it all these preconceived notions of, oh my gosh, you have to be a rocket scientist to go there. You have to be really, you got to be a genius to go there. And that's just not true. We have a bunch of driven young people on our team who know how to manage their time. And if they come here without that skill, they pick it up. And they have a lot of people. So when you come in here, you have 20 plus more other people who have done it before and who are going to guide you and help you and show you the way. And if you have trouble, you have a bunch of people and resources that you can ask for help. And I think that's part of it. There's a lot of players who play at the Division I level who have been the best, who haven't had to ask for help. And I think that becomes something that we need to normalize. Asking for help is actually a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And so if we can encourage that and remind that and teach that, then I think everybody will be better off.
Gotcha. And what support systems are there, like for mental health or just time management and or just getting time away from either hockey or academics to help people, get through a tough time?
Yeah, all of the above. I think in terms of, there are resources here in terms of mental health. There are resources here in terms of, okay, I'm going to go to this. We have a place on campus where you can go and work on skills, whether it's time management or figuring out, okay, let me put all of my syllabi together and figure out what I need to do and when I need to have things done so that I know, okay, I have to be this far along in this paper in order to stay on track so that I finish it by the time that it's due. There are all these sorts of things that are really helpful. And the bottom line is that it's just a matter of asking. And we don't have all the answers. The coaching staff doesn't have all the answers, but what we do have is the ability to connect people and connect our players to the resources that they need.
Gotcha. Okay, well, now we're going to shift back to Lee-J. All right, so you've been at Harvard for 7 years. What made you move from Princeton to Harvard? And I'm assuming Katie Sohn, who has been there since before you were born as the head coach. Okay, well, almost since before you were born. Tell us how that all transpired for you to go help Katie out.
I must be older than I look, if that's the case. But no, so it was a few different things. Katie Stone she hates when I say this, but she's a living legend. And so it was a great opportunity I'm from this area. It was a great opportunity for me to work at a different place and to take on some new responsibilities and added responsibilities in this position. And so I knew that working for her, there would be an opportunity to build a lot of trust, and there would be, if I could build that trust, then there would be a lot of opportunity for me to do a lot of things. And that's exactly what has happened here. And so I am super lucky and so fortunate that I get to work with her every day. And then the personal piece of this whole thing is that I am from here, and it was a chance for me to come home. And at the time, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, was living up here. She's a nurse at Children's Hospital. And so now we have built our life together and have a son.
Oh, that's awesome. And so you're in the same place, which is great. And I'm assuming the commute to work is pretty reasonable now now that you're back in the Boston area. So that's awesome.
Definitely.
Okay, so I still want to stick a little bit with Katie Sohn. So, she's been there since 1997. She's gotten over 500 wins. She's won all these awards and had players who've won all these awards, and including national championship. What makes Katie Stone such an amazing coach?
She listens. And she's convicted when she makes decisions, and she isn't a dictator. She truly does listen, whether it's to her assistant coaches, to her players, and she is a strong person. And so while I called her a living legend before, which is absolutely true, she's also a human being. And So that's what makes her special, is that she can lead a team with confidence, and because she's so competent. And at the same time, she is approachable. And I think outside of Harvard or outside of our program, maybe she doesn't come off that way, but she truly is. And I think that's what makes her unique, and that's what makes her special, and that's why she's a living legend and gets all those awards. And so she's also one other thing. I mean, she's a million things, but she's also a lifetime learner. And so she's not going to rest on her laurels. She's going to actually go and do the homework and continue to learn, and then find ways to implement new ideas into practice, or into our game plans, or into our X's and O's and systems.
Gotcha. So I watched a couple of your recent games against Minnesota Duluth, and so I see she's really active on the bench still, and she's still fiery and got a lot of energy. I'm curious, how involved is she on the recruiting side of things still, or are you the lead for recruiting and finding players for future teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's always involved, and we're always in communication about that stuff. Whether it's I'm on the road, or Sid Daniels is on the road, and then we're reporting back to her, and that sort of thing. I think we're always in communication about that. And this is what I was referring to before. She really has delegated that to me, and I feel really trusted in that sense, which is an amazing thing to feel when you're in this dynamic, and on a three-person coaching staff, plus we have other people who are tremendously important on our staff. So but I think that we are in constant communication about that, and we are always working together on it. I'm really fortunate that she trusts me, that I'm able to be the recruiting coordinator, and she really listens when we talk about these things.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's one player on. We're going to talk more about recruiting right now. We're going to go a little deep if this works out the right way. So there's one player on your team I've been tracking for a few years, because she's from California, and originally from Northern California before she moved to Southern California, and she is one of the top players on your team, Dominic Petrie. And I am curious, were you one of the coaches who recruited her? And if you were, then I got a bunch of questions for you.
Yes, I was involved in the recruiting process with her, and she's a tremendous player and an absolute workhorse.
Yes, and a very good tennis player, as I understand too. So she could have also pursued a tennis, gone down the tennis path as well, if my information is correct. So here's my question for you, because my kids play in a lot of the same systems and leagues that she did, but obviously several years behind her. And I know that she never actually played on any girls' teams except at U.S. national events. I'm curious what the recruiting was like for her, because she only played with boys except at USA Hockey select camps or on the U18 team.
Well, one time I flew out to Vegas for a boys tournament, and just to watch Dom's Petrie. So there aren't too many players. We're always trying to make sure, because of budgets, recruiting budgets and that sort of thing, we're trying to get as much bang for our buck as we can. And so we're trying to go to those big tournaments and see as many players as possible. But this was a special situation, and it's because Dom's is a special player. And so I flew out and watched a couple days of games that Dom's was playing out in Vegas. And that was my first time in Vegas, actually. And so that was kind of a whirlwind too, but it was definitely, it was worth the trip. It was worth the trip.
Great. And so can I ask you, like, watching a girl play on a boys team, they tend not to dominate at that level, because she was playing AAA hockey for the Southern California teams. It was either the Ducks or the Gulls you watched her play for. And, she was probably, she was definitely not the top line, but she was probably either a second or a third liner on those teams, and probably had a role, because she was not seen, well, she definitely was productive. I've looked at her stats. She was not, there, to be the leading goal scorer. How did you put that in perspective for the girls' game? Because she was more of a role player, as opposed to, going out on the center on the power play every time they had a power play situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think once you watch enough, you just get a sense for for individual skills and individual skating ability and that sort of thing. And I think that's how it worked with Dom's, is just watching her, regardless of whether it was the power play or the penalty kill or neither of those, 5-on-5 only, you just get a sense of, all right, this kid, she can play, she can play. And I think that's what happened with her. And then, seeing her in other roles, you think, wow, she now she could dominate. So, and I think the thing about recruiting, if I'm being totally honest, we do our homework. We watch as much as we can. We talk as much as we can. We listen as much as we can. And still, at the end of the day, every single commit, every single recruit, every single one is a dice roll, because you don't know. We don't know exactly what's going to happen or how things are going to shape up or shape out. And I think that's just part of recruiting and part of our job. We're trying to gamble on the right ones.
Yes, and obviously she's worked out quite well for you, and she's still got at least one more year after this one, thanks to whether thankful or unfortunately due to COVID, she's got this year and at least next year in terms of eligibility. So she'll be helping you rack up some more points for a little while. But let me ask you then, in terms of your current team, you have a lot of players on your team. I believe you got 5 goaltenders, which I've never seen before, and maybe 28 skaters. And you've had, so let me just talk about managing the players that you have. And I see you have worked in a lot of your players into games, but some more than others. So talk about the challenge of managing so many players. Obviously, because of COVID, I think half your players are in their first year because you guys didn't play last year. Talk about the situation of managing such a large number of players.
Yeah, I think it's hard. And part of the reason is because we're all competitive and we're all athletes, and they're all athletes who want to play and they want to contribute and they want to feel like they are part of the team and part of the team's success. And I think that's really hard when you have a roster this big where there's a lot of people who aren't dressing. But I think it's about how we frame the narrative, and it's about how we think about these things. So for example, it's really about development for a lot of the young players, especially. They're going to be in big positions later in their career, and while they may not be the on the power play right now or killing penalties right now or necessarily even contributing in huge ways 5-on-5, they will be at some point. And I think that's what we try to keep reiterating to them, because they are great players, and because the truth of the matter is that it would be a different situation if COVID never happened, because our roster wouldn't be as big as it is. And so while that is true, we're also in this reality right now. And so I think we just try to keep reiterating that to them. You got to keep on keeping on. You got to keep developing so that when your number is called, whenever that is, you're ready for that. You're ready for that, whether it's this year or a year in the future.
So I'm assuming now, because of COVID and Omicron hitting so many teams, and like my kids' team has seen many players kind of impacted the number of players that are able to dress. It's actually probably not the worst thing to have 30 players that you can pick from if 5 or even 10 are unable to play.
Yeah, there's no question about that. It is definitely helping us out now, and I feel bad for everybody who's in this position that it's affecting their college career. So hopefully we're on the tail end of this. Who knows? But hopefully we're doing all right.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so I did have a list of questions on like skill development and using video and all that stuff, but you know what, we're going to run out of time, because I do want to get to some real specific recruiting questions about Harvard, because everybody wants to know, how can I get into Harvard and play for the women's team? And so I want to get to those questions. But my one question is about you as a coach, and what have you done to become a better coach in the last year?
Oh, that's a great question. I've done a lot of listening to podcasts, a lot of reading, and a lot of, I think, the NHLCA has put on these great mentorship programs. And so watching a lot of videos and that sort of thing has been tremendous. And the other thing that I think I learned in the past year is that we're also competitive with one another, and that's normal and whatever. But in the past 2 years, we have become so collaborative. And because of that collaboration, we have been able to do some really, really great things. And I think this whole thing hopefully has taught us something that we can carry forward with us, and that's that we can do great things together. And that's something that we always talk to our team about. It's also something that I think we could remember as coaches. We got from 8 teams in our NCAA tournament to 11, and that was because the whole body came together and got it done. And that is a huge feat. It's probably the biggest news in women's hockey in years, in decades. And so it's been quite a year. It's been quite a 2-year period here now.
Should be 16 teams, but that's a topic for another day that I wrote about previously. All right, awesome. Okay, let's get to how do I get to play at Harvard? So the most common question that folks want to know is, what does it take to get an offer from Harvard to play hockey and get into the school, obviously?
So I think just continue to develop and play, and I think this is true no matter what. I think you have to find a balance between exposure and development that works better than the one that's currently out there. Because right now exposure is up here and development is here, and it's starting to come this way, but it's really got to be here. And the reason for that is because, and so basically what I'm saying, because I realize some people can't see what I'm doing with my hands, but the bottom line is that exposure, there's way more exposure happening than development, and it needs to be the other way around, where development needs to be higher, so that what you're exposing is actually something really, really good, and the product is really, really good. And so I think that's a big piece of it. I think another piece of it is to do well in school and to be driven, and the last piece is to be a really good teammate, because we do our homework, and if you're not a good teammate to the players that you're with right now, we're gonna know, most likely, and we're gonna find out somehow, and that will not allow you to come here. The biggest thing for us is that we want people who are good character human beings that treat others with respect and with kindness and with empathy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I was going to ask you what you meant by good people, but you just answered that piece of it. Okay, so I've asked this question to many coaches, and I always get a wishy-washy answer, because the answer is it depends. But is there a way to give perspective on the kind of grades you need to get into Harvard? So I know it depends, and everyone's individual, and look at the whole package. I know every every way not to answer this question. But is there a number at which you go, you don't need to worry about your grades now, because that's a good enough GPA to get in here? Because is like the number 3.4? Is it 3.8? Is it like 3.6? What number do you really not need to worry about your grades to get into Harvard?
Ray, I'm gonna let you down here, but no, there's no number that I can give you.
Geez. Okay, so let me ask you a more specific question that someone sent me, which is, how does the change in testing requirements by Harvard for SATs and the ACT impact recruiting, both from an academic and a hockey perspective?
I think we're in the midst of still figuring that out at this point, and I think we're where it's yet to be seen exactly how that's going to shake out. And so I always think, no matter what, it's a good thing to take the SAT. It's a good thing to take the ACT, as long as you feel comfortable with the given circumstances at this point, and as long as it's something that's accessible to you. So I think in terms of that, it's a good thing to do, because hopefully there's many options for most of the people who are listening to this podcast. And I think there are many directions that people can go. And so having said that, I think it's just a really good thing, because it gives you the option of, some schools don't require this and some schools do. And so I think it's, if it doesn't help you, then you just leave it out. If it does help you, then you just keep it in.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Good to know. Good to at least know the initial perspective on this stuff. All right. So now the most important question is when you have decided to make an offer to somebody to come to Harvard and play on the women's team, what percent of student athletes immediately say yes on the spot when you make them an offer to come to Harvard? Is it 99 or 100%?
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't even want to guess a number or throw something out there. I think, I think, and this is something that I would say to anybody who's looking to make a decision on something like this and something that's this big. Your worth is not tied to the emblem on your jersey or on your shirt or on your sweatshirt or whatever it is. Your worth is tied to you. And so for me, I just don't even, I know where I'm at, and I know that this place is amazing. And I think that that is incredibly, it's humbling to be here. And at the same time, I also think that figuring this whole recruiting thing out, it can be really tough. It can be really stressful. And it's too easy for me to sit here and say, oh, enjoy the process. Well, it's hard to enjoy the process sometimes. And I know it only happens once, and so does everybody else who's going through it. And sometimes that causes more stress. And so to me, I think it's more about asking yourself what you really want, and what you want will look and feel like for you in those moments. Try to think about that, and what will it entail, and then decide, is that really what I want? Because I think that there are a lot of people who are saying, I want to play Division I hockey. And what does that mean for you specifically? Why do you want to do that? And I think the other part of this is to be kind to yourself throughout this whole process, because there's a lot to consider. And like I said at the beginning of this, you have to feel all your feelings, feel them all. And so, yeah, be grateful, and also let yourself be sad or frustrated or disheartened, because then it will feel so much better when it all comes together.
That's awesome. I love the mental side of this, and the advice for players on, like, geez, this is a non-linear process to go through. So, like, be prepared for a lot of zigging and zagging, both from conversations that you have, as well as just mentally what to experience. So I know you're out there on the road in the spring and the summer scouting, and you're probably doing a lot of video for future folks. I do notice that not many players announce that they are going to Harvard publicly. There's not been an announcement in well over 2 years to any of your commits. Maybe it's because you have such a large roster and there may be not that many out there. But how do folks like start getting on your radar and start seeing what the possibility might be for joining Harvard, at least having a conversation with you? What are the ways for them to kind of get on your radar?
I think emailing us is one way, and emailing us when you're going to a specific tournament, or if you're in a tournament or a showcase that's around here. I think coming to our camps is always a great way. I think I think that, like we talked about before, when you are in those situations where you're going to be seen by a bunch of coaches, most likely most of the coaches are going to be there. And so let those ones know, the ones that you're interested in, their schools and their programs, let them know beforehand, so that we can say, you know what, we got to watch this kid, or you know what, we got to highlight her and make sure that we see her game. I think that's a really good way, just to let us know that you're interested, and that goes for all schools,
Gotcha. And then keeping in context the number of players that you have and the likely potential openings that you have over the next couple of years, what advice do you have for players about just the overall recruiting process, and then specifically about Harvard? That'll be my last question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can speak to the overall one for sure. And I think in terms of that, it's really about figuring out what is going to work for you, and being really honest with yourself about where you are and what you want and what you can handle, and really considering that. Because I do think that there are some times when it's like, oh, well, the brand name is what I want. But in reality, why do you want that brand name? What, maybe there's something that's a better fit for you, or maybe there's something that is actually going to help you to develop in a different way. Or maybe you want to play more than you want to sit on the bench, or maybe you want to just be a part of a program that is really, really strong, and you're going to play less there. And I think I just gave you examples of, just a few of the many millions or hundreds or whatever it is. But I think that the bottom line is throughout this whole process, being kind to yourself and being patient with yourself. There's nothing more important than that. And actually being kind and patient with the people who are supporting you, whether it's your parents or your coaches or whoever, because they're going through this too.
That's awesome. Lee-J, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Champs App podcast. I think on a per minute basis, you gave more advice than any other guest that we've had on dealing with how to develop and how to handle all the recruiting and the development side of things as a youth athlete hockey player. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was awesome talking to you.
Thanks for having me, Ray. I really appreciate it. I had a blast.
I really want to thank Lee-J for coming on the podcast. It was great to hear about her path to playing college hockey at Boston College, her coaching experience in the Ivy League, and most importantly, her advice for players on mental health, work ethic, and development versus exposure in the current recruiting environment. And remember, if you got something out of today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you'd like, follow, subscribe, and even better if you could leave us a review so we can keep sharing this important hockey information with folks just like you.